A surgeon?
I realize that you're proving my point.
Very
That
good.
you're acting
God,
immature,
Dr. Han is
knowing
so
that you
valid for
don't know
this.
how to
That man
communicate
will
and you
never
can't
be a
control
surgeon.
your emotions.
Hello?
Hey buddy, I heard the good news. Congratulations.
Crick crab? Listen, hey, I don't know where Shell went, and if I did kidnap them, they're definitely not hiding in my pot boiling alive right now.
What?
I mean, hey, thanks for the, what do you mean congratulations? Did I win something?
Oh, I get it. You're just being a silly little guy. Not every day you upload your 100th video.
100th video?
Well, I know it's technically your 100th horror story video, but I mean, hey, it's pretty much the same thing. Oh boy, I remember my 100th video. It was a long
100th video? I mean, it can't be that bad, right? I'll just dig up some story about a player who throws up on their DM or something. Yeah, a random homophobe posting their L's on main? That'd be easy. I just make fun of them, fly by their car after and ruin their windshield. It's not like I promised my audience something that I couldn't do, right?
But when I heard you were doing 100 stories for your 100th video, I thought, man, I sure wouldn't be stupid enough to say I was gonna cover 100 stories in one video. But then I heard you were doing it? Well, gosh, if anyone could do a video like that, it would be Jacob Crowe.
Oh, flock me.
Hey, so you haven't heard from Shell, have you?
Hey, I think I left something boiling, gotta go.
Huh. That was weird. Oh, there you are. Well, now that you're back, we can get back to planning the global domination of mankind into crab. What are you talking about, Shell? Birds can't turn on stoves. Oh, now come on. Let's join the others in the communal tide dance to awaken the crab god. The river rises, Shell, and his cleansing current waits for no shellfish, should they prove to be selfish. You get it, Shell. It's like selfish sounds like shellfish. Okay, let me start the joke over.
How was I supposed to know people actually vote on these things? Can't I just pretend it was an elaborate scheme to root out bots, like Elon Musk did when Twitter voted to have him step down as CEO? Fine, I'll do it. I mean, I'll read 100 stories. How bad could it be? I recently quit a play-by-post World of Darkness multi-splat game on Discord/Roll20. I was playing as a young 15 werewolf, specifically as a glasswalker for those that know that system. The game permitted adult content, so I chose to mark my character with story only and celibate tags, so I wouldn't have to deal with any of that. I didn't mind innuendo or awkward situations, but I have no interest in erotic play. I was told, of course, that this was fine. There were 2 storytellers in the game, one of which was the main, while the other was secondary. Immediately, I recognized the main storyteller was a problem, even though they'd been the one that said my character would be fine. Set in modern day, they would often speak of my character as Gen Z in a derogatory way, even though the game was literally full of characters in that age range. After getting that vibe from them, I opted to just avoid them in the roleplay. Unfortunately, this meant that I wasn't able to do a lot of the quests in the game, as they were given by the storyteller's 2 non-player characters, a lowly time mage and a similarly sexualized space mage. Oh dear god, a lolly. If you ever are curious as to when you should disregard someone's opinion on anything, look no further than if they have an anime profile picture of a girl who obviously looks 12, that the person insists is actually 10,000 years old. Controversial take, but the age of consent is 18. I know this is difficult for some people, but this also applies to Cunny Lover 69 and whichever anime girl that they want to call their waifu. Well, let's continue. I was fine with this, but they started making comments about how I hadn't done the intro yet, or that I was procrastinating. Admittedly, I was, since I just plain didn't want to interact with them. I played in an arc with the other storyteller, which went well, and I was fine with that. However, the other storyteller wouldn't leave that be, and eventually pushed the narrative where I'd have to meet the quest givers. So, reluctantly, I performed the ritual that would put my character in contact with them. Almost immediately, my character is being berated by them. However, much of the insults, while being given in character, was actually targeting out-of-character information. For instance, I introduced my character into the scene by describing a garment of hers, as wearing nerdy shirts was a trait of hers. I like to add descriptions so there's some depth other than, "She walks into the room." The response that I received was one of the characters saying that they don't need to know what my shirt looks like. Yes, this was stated in character, in response to me describing out of character that my character had a shirt with a witty saying. It only went downhill from there, as they also seemed to take issue with me using any kind of pop reference. At one point, I was instructed that if I used another one, I wouldn't be able to do any of the quests, and would face permadeath. Yes, this was told to me by the character. Sure, I know that it was a power-mad storyteller, just trying to use the character as a mouthpiece to make it seem like the guilt wasn't theirs. I made no reply after that comment. My next post was in the general out-of-character channel to say that I'd show myself out. Having sexual topics in your games? Totally fine. Using your lolly DMPC to shame a player who told you they didn't want to roleplay laying pipe with you? I don't think this DM needs new players. He needs his computer hard drive searched by the FBI. In my first week of college my freshman year, one of my new friends invited me to his first time GMing a game, which happened to be a Mutants and Masterminds game. I was excited, and when the day finally came, more people showed up than he was expecting. He was expecting most people to say no, but there ended up being upwards of 10 people there, possibly 20. We did some character creation, and one of my new, and future, friends helped me make a fairly broken illusionist character that also could kind of read emotions or something. I remember the turns in combat taking a long time, and people were having a little trouble following along. Which brings us to the real climax of the story. Our final encounter was with a huge kaiju with tentacles, and it was rampaging in the big city, something that became a theme with him and his GM style. We were tasked with stopping the kaiju and possibly figuring out why it was rampaging. I remember not having a lot of damage-dealing maneuvers, so I tried figuring out why it was making such a fuss. The GM said that it seemed to be looking for something, but I didn't roll high enough to know what. So I assumed that it was probably looking for a mate. I did the only thing I could think of, and made an illusion of a mate, which caused a bit of chaos, and the GM was pretty unhappy that that was what I had attempted to do. The game ended after that, and he decided not to run anything else for a long period of time. I later found out that the GM had planned for us to find the kaiju's baby, and I guess I must have ruined it. This wasn't really that bad of a horror story, but it does kind of reveal some of the tendencies that the GM in this story has. I have another, much worse story that I've yet to compile with the other player I'm still in contact with from this particular GM. Huge GMing mistake right here. It's good to have an idea of how things turn out, but do not write an ending. If you write down 2 ideas of what players can do in your final encounter, they will almost always surprise you with a secret 3rd idea. Fresh off the runway, folks. Someone submitted 2 applications to my game under different names, but kept the same Discord username. Frankly, it wouldn't have been difficult to identify Gregory and Chad as the same person, had they used different usernames. Their answers were obnoxious and offensive, perverted comments about women, and stark homophobia. Soon after receiving their applications, they sent me a message request. I knew what I was getting into, but my curiosity was morbid and irresistible. When I informed them why they wouldn't be considered for the preliminary interviews, they threw the F slur, and then proceeded to be an ass, only to finally claim, "It was just a prank, bro." Hey, in the spirit of transparency, it's gonna be an outright no. Parts of your application were totally fine, but whether other parts were jokes and bad taste or not, they honestly put me off. The second application under Chad was frankly an immediate no. As a gay man, your answers to the lines in Vale's question made me very uncomfortable. Your comments on women in your application also made me uncomfortable. This is not an atmosphere that I want at my table, and neither of the 2 current players wanted either.
Okay, I only murder Who hit on me? You weren't gonna hit on me, were you? Jeez, you take things so seriously. What happened to live in a fucking pineapple? Totally disingenuous. Sigh. What are you gonna do when Jesus does come back? What the this comment.
Wait, come back? Oh no. Guys, if you keep shortening out the letters of Bible, did you know it spells out bye? Jesus? Is there something you want to tell us?
Lol. Shout, OMG. Seriously, your application was in bad taste? Chaos is all well and good when it is done right. Chaos is not good when you use it like a trap.
Thank you for providing me with an RPG horror story. Your idiocy has not gone to waste.
No, hun.
Hun? Is he a Karen?
I wasn't being serious. It is hilarious that you think I am.
You're ridiculous. Goodbye. Ah, a classic staple of when 14-year-old edgelords are too cowardly to own up to their own ignorant and bigoted opinions online. Schrodinger's douchebag. When someone on the internet is simultaneously kidding and not kidding, depending on whether or not the person listening to them likes what they have to say.
Ha! I'm just palling around when I call for your death.
On the basis of your sexuality.
I'm just joshing around. And it's my birthday. You wouldn't hurt a little guy on his birthday, would you?
So, my friend who is the DM was running a homebrew campaign and was fairly loose with the items he gave out. After doing a mild turn-in quest, the DM has me roll on a loot table. I get the ring category. I jokingly say, wouldn't it be funny if I got the Ring of 3 Wishes? Sure enough, I got it. Now I will say, I power game a bit, and already knew what I was going to do. Later that night, in-game, I told the DM I wished I was a lich. The table collectively drops their jaws, thinks about it for a few seconds, and says, sure, what's your phylactery? And I say, my amulet. Next I tell the DM, I want to use my second wish. The DM is starting to get a little worried. I tell him I want to cast on my phylactery the spell Sequester, which, long story short, makes it invisible. Liches, by the way, have true sight. Moments afterward, I tell the DM my final wish. I wished for the amulet of ultimate evil. Again, he thinks on it, and says, sure, you have it, sounding defeated as he said it. The session ends 30 minutes later. After 2 days pass, we get a message in the group text saying he is canceling the campaign. While I can see someone getting mad at the player for doing a bit of power gaming in this situation, I can sympathize with the OP here. I think it would be an uncontroversial statement to say that most game masters want players who are creative and think outside the box. But a player who is creative is going to go out of their way to test the game's boundaries. Combine that with a very powerful item with no prior warnings about the dangers of its use, or how its misuse can detract from the campaign you're trying to run, why wouldn't they abuse it? Hell, I personally would be insulted if they didn't. So if you're not comfortable adding something with the potential of dramatically altering your game, then don't make it an option. Adding a shovel to your sandbox will help you build a sandcastle. But adding an earth-moving tractor? All I'm saying is don't be surprised if it changes the scope of your game a bit. I've wanted to share an RPG story for a while. However, I feel like most of my stories don't match the gravitas of the RPG horror stories I've seen out there, as most of my players are good friends with minor or unentertaining problems. However, I do have one player that I would consider a problem player, that I chose to actively distance myself from. I don't really mean any hard feelings between us, as it was mainly an issue of miscommunication, and us not gelling together. My main system was and is D&D 5th edition, but I'm open to trying different systems. This was years ago, at the start of the pandemic. I decided to run an altered version of Lost Mines of Phandelver, using pieces of Dragon of Icespire Peak, which I would recommend doing if you plan on adapting that module. There were 4 players, with only 2 of them being relevant, who I'll refer to their character names, Kleeck and Mad Jack. Kleeck was an Aarakocra rogue swashbuckler. I believe I was a little weary of it, considering Aarakocra have 50 feet flying speed, and due to a previous game, we considered swashbuckler to be overpowered, thanks to Torval, a real bastard who dealt 69 damage to gods multiple times. However, I was pretty lax back then, and didn't want to deny it as it was a character he played before, and I wasn't so attuned with balancing the game as I was having fun. The game started at level 3, where the party was hired to escort a young priest to Phandalin from Neverwinter, so that they could start a ritual to protect the town from monsters and other threats. The priest had a kobold companion named Rox, who liked to hold onto the material components needed for the ritual, and he was captured by drow assailants in the night. Now, one of the drow was holding the components in a bag, and was trying to escape with them. But before they could, Mad Jack cast Shatter on the bridge they were on, and shattered them again once they fell. In the aftermath of the battle, the party discovered the components for the ritual were destroyed in the chaos of the battle, and that they would have to gather new ones to prepare the ritual. This chain of events was actually really fun, as it made the upcoming quests more interesting and pressing, and I enjoyed planting where the party could get the quest items. The party leveled up, and made their way to Phandalin to start their quest for the components, ending the first session. Next session is where the problems start, as the party make their way to town, and Kleeck and another character speak to the town guard captain, with Kleeck lying about his identity and purpose in town, with the other player being left confused. After that conversation, Kleeck declared that to find one of the components, a diamond, he will just fly back to Neverwinter and steal one. This prompted a long discussion about the logistics of, and convincing him not to do it. It came out of left field, and it was very strange that he wanted to leave the party for a few days to continue the plot. I don't remember his reasoning, but I think it was along the lines of, "It's what my character would do. Caw!" You see, he's an Aarakocra, so he has to make the bird sounds. I think that was the case because his character never told the party what he was doing in character. We managed to convince him to not do that, when we told him he couldn't fly 200 miles there and back in one day. However, instead of stopping his pursuit of the Diamond MacGuffin, or at least talking to the party to discuss where to get one, he decided to set his sights on a more local option. The manor on the hill that held the mercenary company that protected the town. It was a nice house, so he assumed it must have a diamond worth 100 gold pieces. It's not the most far-fetched assumption, but funny in hindsight, when he ignored the jewelry shop in town. He split from the party when the party was confronting some thugs. He flew over the manor, noticed there were guards, and was spotted. And he ducked in the forest at the foot of the hill. He discovered a grate to an entrance of the manor, and this is where I messed up. He failed lockpicking it, as I set the DC as 25 or even 30. However, he just kept lockpicking it until he succeeded. Which I should have said, no, you can't do that. It defeats the purpose of rolling in the first place, which is how I now enforce lockpick checks. Once again, a quick PSA, if there is no consequence for rolling, then don't roll. If they have the skill, the tools, and the time, just let them pick the door. Now back to the story. Part of the reason why I allowed it was because there was a map prepared, and something similar happened in a previous game where they broke into an area they weren't supposed to be until later. And that was fine. Inside the manor, he didn't find much, but was being followed by the guards, and he went up into the manor, which I didn't prepare, and was a bit overwhelmed. His attitude and demeanor also put me off, as he was very insistent that there was no way he could get caught. And in response to, "The guards are on your tail," he says, "I outrun them, and they can't touch me at all." Eventually, we stopped the session, saying that it was a mess, and that I didn't want to continue when I had nothing to give to him. But next session, I could prepare it better if he wanted to continue it again. So we restarted from outside next session. Things should theoretically be fine, right? Next session, the other party members finished their encounter with the thugs, and Kleeck went back to the manor, which I prepared a ground floor map that I liked. He found some things but didn't go upstairs. He went back into the basement, where he encountered an arrow trap that worked off a magic sensor. He got annoyed and argued with us about the traps, mainly because he was very resistant to taking damage. That trap may have been unfair, admittedly, but I don't remember the exact details on that. I thought I gave him opportunity to detect it. He just didn't roll high enough. But we did get through that, with me trying to appease my player. Deeper in, he finds a guard who casts sleep on him to capture the intruder. Kleeck was acting very abrasive and passive-aggressive, saying that 1 minute is not enough time to bind an unconscious person with rope, trying his best to argue that him going alone into a guarded compound would only end well for him. It stopped being fun at this point, when he was so adverse to failure and experiencing consequences. The player of Mad Jack got mad at him over this, and the session devolved and shortly ended. Kleeck's players said that he didn't even want to go into the manor anymore, and said he felt forced by me preparing it, even though I asked him if I should prepare in the first place. It was entirely his idea to break from the party to risk his character for a reward not guaranteed, and he got mad whenever there was any roadblock. After this incident, I tried to talk about things with him, but it ended with him leaving that campaign and me no longer being his friend. One of the main reasons was because he was someone that thought he was always in the right and couldn't accept his wrongdoing. During this and in previous incidents, he thought that I was the main issue. And I can concede I made mistakes, should have just said no to this entire stunt, and should have been more clear on the consequences. But his insistence that he did nothing wrong, and his aversion to failure, made me not want to play with him anymore. Again, I want to say that I haven't spoken to him since. I don't hate Kleeck's player, I just don't think we were compatible to be friends in the first place. I just hope this story was somewhat entertaining and illuminating, and how you should really communicate with your players and know when to say no about things. There is no bigger GM superpower than the power of saying no. Remember that you're playing the game too, and if something makes you uncomfortable, you reserve the same rights as your players to say that you don't want to do something. So this happened only a few hours ago, so forgive me if I don't compose this in the best manner, because I'm still a bit shaken up by it. We were playing D&D at my buddy Jay's house, as is customary every Sunday. The session goes well. We have some random encounters on a desert road. As we're packing up to leave, we hear screaming from his wife. We hear, "Fire! Fire! There's a fire!" We were in the basement, and we quickly made our way upstairs to escape the house. Through the back door at the top of the stairs, I see their shed fully engulfed in flames, and my buddy Jay rushing out the door with a fire extinguisher. Of course, it was all for naught, as the flames had spread too much. But by the time I get out the front, put his dogs in the car to keep it safe, and go to the backyard to retrieve him, he's got a garden hose trying in vain to put the flames out. Several neighbors and I are screaming at him to get out of the yard, until he gives up and the fire department arrives soon after. Several concerned neighbors, who saw the fire before we ever noticed it, had called the fire department. Thankfully, they arrived quickly. The home suffered minimal damage from the department, pulling back the siding of the attic to make sure there was no fire in his home. He has insurance, so he'll get it repaired. And the neighbor's shed suffered heat damage as well, and half his yard is scorched. Everybody is well, and nobody was harmed. We're across the street from the smoldering ruins of Jay's shed. Then he turns to me and asks, "So, same time next week?" You know, when I read the title of the post, I didn't expect a session going up in flames to be so literal. I don't know if I could play TTRPGs anymore. While DMing, my players will either interrupt me, explaining things with their assumptions. While I'm engaging with something for a specific player, the others will start conversations about their lives that end up pulling the attention of the player I'm trying to talk to, leading long tangents about movies or shows, complain about limitations of specific spells. No, a damage spell shouldn't be able to heal without any abilities that would cause them to heal. Or sometimes flat out be on their phones at the table. My last game, one of the players fully stopped caring because they were tired/grumpy and just kept saying that they wanted their character to die mid-combat because it was late, after table tangents took up more than half the game.
It's just not fun DMing anymore. I get sass for asking someone to at least tell me what they're doing before rolling. The tables I've been a player at have either been littered with people either going off on the same life drama/tangents about something they've seen to the point to where only me and the DM were playing the game anymore, or people seeming to want to have drama between players, not PCs, the players above board. I just miss TTRPGs when I could stay immersed in the game for a session, and questions were about rules that were misunderstood, not outright arguing with DMs, whether I am the DM or not. Just needed to get that off my chest, I guess. Sorry for the rant.
I think it is completely valid to feel something therapeutic about playing a TTRPG, but just based on how this group is acting, I think they should just stick to therapy. Today I got kicked out of a Cyberpunk RED game because my trans femme medtech was too political for Cyberpunk RED. That's it. That's the story. Wow. I can't believe that the setting that talks about corporate exploitation by the wealthy elite that work in tandem with a corrupt government to oppress the working class by forcing them into debt through the pursuit of cutting-edge technology that they can't afford, all while turning even their own bodies into a commodity that can be bought and sold to the highest bidder, one of which being the military-industrial complex, and causing its own citizens to pursue terrorism as their only means of escapism and releasing themselves from the death grip of the 5 companies in the trenchcoat that America has become a game about politics. I can't believe my game about transhumanism has a trans person in it. Has Cyberpunk become woke? Okay, here it is. My horror story that everyone would love to know. The story of being too stupid to play D&D. Excuse me for being long-winded and overly detailed. This was a long time ago in a system far away. A D&D 2nd edition. I was officially introduced to Dungeons & Dragons. I had only heard of it from their video games. I was fortunate enough to have known Treasure of Tarman, all the way to Baldur's Gate, and the cartoon series from my childhood. All my friends played, and I wanted to play actual D&D as well, after years of hearing about their campaign that they were playing. Although they had only achieved level 6 in 3 years of playing, I had made a character with the help of one of my friends. The sad part was, I blew off hanging out with my girlfriend I had at the time to do so. I was told about what there was for characters in the campaign, and the one I wanted to make so badly was similar to one of the other characters. I guess there was some sort of rule that you couldn't have 2 elven rangers in the same party, but we found a loophole. The other ranger was a high elf. I wanted to be a wood elf specifically. I did not have the most amazing stats, as I rolled up fairly mid-range stats. I barely made the prerequisite scores for the class. That's a pre-3E thing. I still miss that feature. My highest ability being a 16 after modifiers. I played an introductory adventure with that character, and my friend who helped me DM'd it. But after that, I was supposed to join in on the campaign. That was where the game ended for me. I was told by the rest of my friends when the game was supposed to be, but not where. I hunted down the only places I knew a few of them lived, and nobody was there. We did not have a local game store in our city. Yes, we live in a city that to this day has no local game store. More on that to come. So I could not find out where to go to meet them. It never happened. They would always tell me about their campaign, but started coming up with the excuse that they didn't want me to play with them because I was too stupid to play D&D. Now may I add, the one who was the largest perpetrator of this is someone who has been trying to start a cult since we were in the 8th grade. We are all in our 40s now, and he still is trying. I endured that for the final 2 years of high school, because crappy friends are better than no friends at all, right? Right? After graduation, when I was the only one not invited to the massive graduation party that they held, I had created my own group of D&D players, thanks to one of my aunts who was very close in age to me and played D&D as well. Had helped me purchase all of the books that we could find when I was on spring break, and we had quite a mass of players, 12 of us in total. That even included my new girlfriend, who had previously left her bad relationship with that original group's actual DM. Yeah, that never sat well with a lot of them. She had a similar type of situation too, as they are to this day horrible gatekeepers. Flash forward to about 5 years later, and all of them have had fairly decent jobs, and they banded together to open our city's first local game store. Well, that was bad. I was constantly told by many of my players that they would be chased out of the store, and also heard from around town that they would refuse to sell anything to anyone who wasn't an exclusive member of their store. Needless to say, the store went out of business in a few months. It was either that, or the actual owner of the store, my girlfriend's ex, had been terminated from his prominent management position at a local bank because his parents and all his siblings were arrested for attempting to steal a baby? Yes, they were caught in the act doing so. Flash forward another 10 years. Yes, it continues. I, after not having contact with these pieces of shit since high school, and still having the same girlfriend through all of this, my original group had disbanded and spread to many corners of the world after one of our players had passed away, and the wannabe cult leader had ran into us at the movie theater. He asked if I still play, and lo and behold, we both still did. We were asked to join him in a game of Pathfinder, since we were still big 3.5 players, and this was still in the 4E days. Let's just say that after 20 years, nothing has changed. I was treated the same as I was in high school. Mind you, at this time, I had just become a county executive, and the second session had almost ended in him and his wife getting divorced. He wanted to add more players to the game, and my girlfriend had a suspicion she knew who one of the other players were. We were never asked to play again after that second session. I had since then gone on to continue to build up my massive library, adding Pathfinder 1st Edition, and Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, the ASIF RPG sucks for everything except for the hold building, and had started teaching younger generations how to play. Whatever TLDR means, sometimes it is better to keep those who you leave behind, left behind. Also, he, to this day, is still trying to start a cult. Well, OP, with friends like these, who needs enemies? I swear, it's always the strangest motherflockers who want to gatekeep the hobby. Also, if you're going to start a cult, we all know you have to either extort people for money by preying on their religious and spiritual beliefs, or bang their moms in an island in Croatia like Jared Leto. Warning for mention of fictional sexual slavery. I've been fortunate that my troubling TTRPG encounters have been few and far between since getting into the hobby over a decade ago. But this one stuck out with one player as a stinker. Back in 2019, I was invited to an online Pathfinder 1st Edition game by a local fellow, DM, who I met through unrelated social media. I wanted to go simple for my first character for a new group, so I rolled a human fighter with a couple wizard levels. I made her a plucky go-getter near the start of her adventuring career. Her motivations were altruistic and simple. Find her missing twin sister, who had been captured by the main enemy faction. Worth noting that I was the only female player, and my character was the only female PC. But everyone in the group is welcoming, and I don't sense any red flags. We're given a trial to join an adventurer/mercenary guild that had been fighting cultists related to the big bad faction. To pass, we need to survive the night in an undead-infested graveyard while defeating a certain amount, and we manage without much trouble, with all PCs getting to show off their stuff. A smooth first session. That is, until one of the other players, gesturing to my greatsword-toting, undead butt-kicking PC, suggests the group celebrates by
selling the woman off. We can find a buyer in the seedier parts of town and celebrate with the gold she fetches us. That way she'll actually be good for something.
A moment passes with the group in stunned silence. And before one can sound the invocation of, "Dude, not cool," that player backtracks and says he doesn't expect the group to actually go through with it. His intention was to make a character that started out by rubbing the party the wrong way, but the character would come to see the error of his ways, thanks to character development spurred by friendship and teamwork. Suffice to say, the wannabe slave trader never got the chance, as the player was uninvited from the group shortly after the session ended. The rest of us continued the campaign and had a grand time. and the DM is now one of my roommates and closest friends, where the real first trial was the problem player that had to be kicked along the way. Legitimately, I do think you can make a sexist member of the party that learns the error of their ways into a thing. I mean, look at Sokka in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Obviously, you need to make sure that people are comfortable with it, but also a big problem is that the writer of the character, in this case the player, can't also be sexist. You see, when Sokka gets his ass kicked, he goes, hey, maybe girls can fight too. But when this player has his character get shown up by a badass fighter, his immediate thought is, sell her to slavery. If you're going to play a bigoted character, at least make it make sense, you dingus. This one is kind of a short glory story, I guess. Me and my friends were playing a homebrewed Soul Eater game, and one of the bad guys swung a lead pipe at Raoul, my character. Now, 2 things before I continue. 1, I am very creative with my problem solving. And 2, Raoul, due to backstory reasons, has dragon blood infused into him, giving him the ability to use some fire-based attacks, including a small fireball he can launch from his mouth. Anyway, the guy takes his swing, and Raoul catches the pipe in his mouth. I then proceed to use said fireball to heat up the pipe, causing the guy to burn his hands and drop his weapon. TLDR, I caught a pipe in my mouth, and in a roundabout way, casted heat metal. I'm a pretty new DM, though I've hosted a few campaigns. They haven't lived for long though, so that sucks. I've decided I'll finally try and host a long-lived campaign, instead of just giving up on it a few sessions in. I got 4 players, so that's nice. The same day the campaign's supposed to start, we're playing on Discord, by the way. One of my players, let's call him P, asks me if he can have a young dragon as a pet. We're playing at level 1. I tell him no, but then P says that it will be purely for RP, and the dragon won't fight in combat. I still say no. He gets mad at me for not letting him have fun. I called him immature, and then P said how I'm acting like, and I quote, and your 13-year-old ass is going through a emo phase, being serious about everything. I'm not 13, by the way. He says how he's mature and stuff, and I ask him if he's not gonna play. He says he isn't, so I kick him out of the Discord server. I don't know where this whole idea of keeping a dragon as a pet comes from, but at least in D&D, the kind of person that treats a dragon like a pet and not a friend usually ends up extra crispy. To a dragon, much like with your cat, if one of you is considered to be the pet, it definitely isn't the dragon. Last year I was in the most incredible D&D campaign. The DM was experienced and homebrewed a high fantasy, open world setting, set in a fantasy school for heroes. He handcrafted personal arcs and homebrew magic items for each of our 4 characters. I was fully invested in the world, other characters, and plot. I cried when our first arc revealed that our aberrant sorcerer was basically an orphan who had been picked up and experimented on. When the culmination of the campaign was that my patron, who had helped the party over and over again, was functionally collecting infinity stones that we had been giving him the whole time. I and the rest of the table lost our collective minds. The DM abandoned his entire plot, and instead let us drive the plot to explore the world with our own personal ambitions and goals being the focus. To this day, I have never seen an open world game work that well. I happily woke up at 2 in the morning, even though I had work that day, for nearly a year to play in that campaign. I have been in a couple games since that have also been quite good, and that I have enjoyed, but recently a friend wanted to run Descent into Avernus, and kept asking me to play, as he said he likes my RP style. And honestly, I am struggling to invest in the game. The plot seems so unrelated to our characters' goals and motivations. It is hard to find it engaging. The side quests feel generic and uninspired. The verbatim descriptions are long and bland. The worst part is that outside of a few too many homebrew rules, nothing is really wrong or bad. The whole experience is just fine. Ish. I can't really expect much more from a module. I keep thinking back to that amazing game of D&D, and feel bad, because that clearly is not a healthy expectation to have for my DM. My new DM told me as much when we had a chat about this, and to be frank, it is a reasonable enough point. It is just that now I have tasted how good D&D can be, I am not satisfied with average D&D anymore. Maybe I am just burnt out of the game, but it feels hard to have any passion, and I feel like I'm dragging the game down with my apathy. I am definitely the horror story here. Before I get into my real advice, let me hit you with some cold water and tell you that all official D&D modules are bad. Play Gradient Descent for Mothership instead, you fucker! It sucks to say, but it sounds like you're looking for a very particular kind of game. And based on this post, it sounds like your new DM isn't capable of providing that kind of game. That's okay. No one is the asshole here. It's just not your cup of tea, and you shouldn't feel obligated to have to drink it. I will say this though, consider trying to be a GM yourself. If you liked that feeling your old DM gave you, what if you could make others feel that same feeling that you felt? And hey, who knows? Maybe you could inspire one of your players into becoming the exact kind of person who could run the kind of game that you would want to play. Pay it forward and see where it takes you. Sorry for any bad formatting, I'm on mobile. I found this campaign through a friend, the DM. I had told her that I wanted to play, and she invited me to her campaign. She had said that the other players were really aggressive and killing everything. So we worked to help me make my character, complete noob, and start playing. I started in a kitchen after coming through a hole in the wall, when the rest of the party, after a long battle, came to loot. The DM was insistent on us messing with the stove. Like, there is a stove in the room. Do you touch it? Do any of you mess with the stove? Constantly. None of us do, and our cleric does an Arcana check, rolling a 19. The DM said that he spotted nothing. The DM asked again if we mess with the stove. No one does. So the DM PC goes and messes with the stove. Then a ghost appears. The party fights her on this, and the ghost is removed. Later, the party is trying to cross a river. The cleric, who is the strongest character in our party, swims across but gets attacked by a siren, who doesn't sing for some reason, and begins to get dragged underwater. The cleric attacks the siren, and the DM blows up at us. The DM is angry that we didn't try to pacify it instead of attacking it, saying that we are in its home and it was just defending itself. Our cleric, the one who got attacked, responded by saying that I get attacked too, and this is a public road. How many people have died to this thing? DM, it wasn't trying to kill you. Cleric, it was dragging me underwater. The DM then yells at us saying that it was an important character and we needed to be kinder. The DM then just says that the encounter never happened, just like she did with the ghost. The party tries to talk with her about it, but she hides when we go to talk with her. We set meetings, she doesn't show up. I went and found her. She cried, saying that it wasn't fair, and that they were only protecting their own territory, and it was only self-defense. However, they refused to let the players have self-defense. I left the campaign, after joining the cleric's campaign, who also left. Look, I'm sure that siren is a nice lady, but I don't really care how nice she is if I'm getting plunged underwater against my will. If that happens to me, you bet your ass I'm going for the eyes. During the pandemic, my family was desperate to do something different during our weekly online hangouts, and agreed to do a few one-shots, DM'd by my kid. Of the 9 of us, only my kid, brother, and I had ever played D&D, but everyone seemed to enjoy it regardless. In spite of this, we only ever played a couple of times, and I wanted more. While the local game stores were opening back up and bringing back in-store games, I was still wary of spending that much time around people, and figured I'd have to wait till my family was bored enough to play again. Then my boyfriend sees an LFG post on a Discord he's part of. He tells them we're interested, and plays the first session to see how it goes. They had had their butts kicked by bandits, and desperately need a cleric. So I went ahead and joined. They're a great group of guys, and we got through a certain beginner adventure, and started up another module, and ended up playing for several months. Good times were had by all. We were a cleric, wizard, monk, paladin, and ranger. None of them were really an issue. Like I said, a great group. So what, you may ask, was the problem? Was I harassed? Flirted with inappropriately? Was there that guy? A shitty DM? An out-of-control rules lawyer? Nope. The problem was me. Also during the pandemic, I was gifted an amazing pair of noise-canceling Bluetooth headphones. They were a must while locked down with 3 other people, as I am sensitive to certain noises, and with everyone home, there were a lot of them. I had tried using them for gaming and for work calls, and was under the impression that there was no microphone for me to scream obscenities at griefers, since no one seemed to hear me screaming obscenities. Alas, it did work for calls though, and I figured the phone was picking up my voice, and always kept it close by. All during our D&D game, I used these headphones with my phone on Discord, walking away from my phone when I was going to eat something crunchy, or make any other sort of noises, or when my kid or roommate would come in to ask me a question, or wanting to vent. Even talking as quietly as I could, my boyfriend would yell for me to turn on mute, chalking it up to him hearing me because he was in the next room. I'd just walk farther away from my phone, thinking that the other guys wouldn't catch what I was saying at that distance. Some of these bits of conversation would get personal, and SFW-ish. Nothing that I'd want 4 near strangers to hear. Then I'm in family chat one day, and walked far enough from my phone that I was certain they couldn't hear me. And yet they responded to whatever, probably vulgar, thing I had said to my boyfriend. Wait, you can hear me? I asked. I walked to the other end of the house and asked. I walked outside and shut the door and asked. I walked all the way out to the street and asked. Yes, they all responded, laughing. My mind raced back to everything that was likely to have been discussed during our D&D sessions, from how badly I had to go to the bathroom to the terrible cramps we were having. Stuff like what a wanker my roomie's ex was, or me joking about the DM probably having a crush on me, being why he always tried to kill my character, and many, many other highly cringe-tastic things that my boyfriend tried to warn me about. In spite of the excellent quality of my headphones, I simply didn't listen. Thankfully, the guys never said anything. If so, I would promptly have had to leave the game, the Discord, and possibly the planet. TLDR. Always remember to mute, kids. Personally, I would have died of cringe or shriveled into a corncob. Well, now you know your headphones work.
And knowing is half the battle.
Content warning. Sexual violence, children getting hurt. I, some months ago, got into a Descent into Avernus game. Things started reasonably well, and the DM did a fairly good job, and obviously put a lot of work into it, remaking the maps on Dungeon Craft, for example. But there were some weird choices from the start. He had some module installed on Foundry that made random critical fumbles at a 1, and those ranged from basically nothing happens to combat-breaking stuff. I distinctly remember one that just broke your weapon. Yes, even if magical or story relevant. And one that emptied your spell slots if you're a spellcaster. Imagine that happening at level 20. What really threw me off was in an occasion that I missed 2 sessions, because of really personal stuff. I just let them know I wouldn't be able to make it that session. And I guess my mistake was that I didn't choose to elaborate on why. Then, at the session I got to go in, he told me to add 2 exhaustion points. I asked why, and he said it was because of the missed sessions. I asked if it was just for this session, and he said,
No, they are permanent, even if your character dies and you roll a new one.
I said, okay, I'm leaving the table then. Because I was playing a fucking bard, and I won't bother playing with disadvantage on all ability checks with the class most focused on them. Not to mention the half speed that can be deadly. He then, probably not wanting to deal with recruiting another player, decided to retract it, and make it so you lose 1 point at the end of the session. Unfortunately, that was enough to make me try to stay, partially out of respect for the amount of extra work and paid resources he was using to run the game. Then comes a person I don't know if I can call that guy, but he was definitely a guy. I'll just call him Barbarian. I learned later he was playing a chaotic evil character, and yeah, I could tell. First, it starts with him being an incredibly loud and intense character or guy. Don't know if he is naturally like that, but he would constantly get in negotiations or social interactions, instigating violence, and sometimes get over people's plans for diplomacy, which was kinda constant with me because Bard. The surprise for me is when we invade a mansion, and with a certain NPC villain that is disabled and has spies, people who ran/played the module might recognize. He threatens to... Oh. Him, if he doesn't give us information. The DM asks for clarification if his character was willing to realize the threat, if he doesn't get it, or if it's a bluff, to determine if it's intimidation or deception, probably. And of course he says he is absolutely willing to do this to him. That was really out of nowhere to me. Because they didn't mention this was a possibility in the game, I'm not triggered by it. Neither do I think anyone at the table was. But yeah, they should have mentioned that. After some sessions, we are robbed by a gang of small children that take some of our purses, including mine and the barbarians. We find one of them, and he tortures the kid to the point of breaking his arm to get info on where the other children are. Mind you, that's after I suggest, I don't know, charm person or suggestion? All changed when just after level 5, I think the DM takes us to Candlekeep, and we try to buy and sell some magic items. And the DM basically has the shopkeep let us freely draw from a deck of many things. And for context, my character was addicted to gambling by his backstory. So by this being explained to him, and very low wisdom, it was basically metagaming for him to not draw from it. But another player draws first, and mine second. This was apparently an on-the-fly decision by the DM, because he hadn't prepared the deck. So he solved that by counting the number of cards and having us roll D number of cards. Me and the other player roll at the same time, but his comes on top. And while the DM is counting the first player's roll on the book, me, with my physical book, am counting mine, and then bam, moon. If you don't know, that means 1d3 wishes. You can imagine my giddiness. When the DM goes to count mine, he takes a bit, and says something different, skull, which means my character has to fight an avatar of death. I get confused, but think that he might have been using some other list. He leaves that for later, while the same first character, that got something that does nothing, inversing alignment, while being true neutral, draws again, and bam, same number as mine, so skull as well. So there are now 2 characters fighting death. Which one do you think won? The fighter with a legendary shield with fireballs and wall of fire? It was +2, but I think AC didn't matter because the enemy automatically hit. Or the bard with support spells? The results were predictable. At the time, I was okay with it because it was a fitting end for an addicted gambler, and I started making a new character. Made a Hexadon, but after we, descend into Avernus, don't think that's a spoiler. We get 2 sessions of only combat encounters, non-stop, that made me barely have time to talk, as my character, and the conspiracy theory that the DM had purposely not given me the right card, was getting into me, which I would understand if he just changed for another positive card, fearing that one could break his game. He also could have just asked me nicely not to. After those, I just made some excuse, and left the table. TLDR, DM makes permanent exhaustion that will follow all of your characters for the campaign, and partially backtracks on it, while abrasive chaotic evil player threatens rope and later tortures a child. I leave after possible deck of many things manipulation, resulting in death of character. Look, I understand wanting to alter the deck of many things. Any DM that's used it before knows there's a lot in it that can be absolutely game-breaking. But this DM didn't use an altered version of the deck, and instead just swapped a good card for a bad one. Kind of a dick move in my opinion, even if the player metagamed the results a bit. Also, why the fuck didn't anyone kick this barbarian out? Really? Can we just kick players like that? Am I crazy for thinking this? I feel like I'm going crazy. This one is more lighthearted, and happened way before my other post. The one with exhaustion punishments. Fortunately, it died on session 0 for me. I have no idea if he actually managed to get a game going after that. So, starting the story, I was searching for a free game on Roll20, and applied to this one that the GM clearly stated that we'd need a webcam, and he intended to stream it. I had one, and was okay appearing on YouTube or Twitch. I applied, and actually got in, and we started talking after I joined a quick call with the DM to confirm I had a good mic and cam. The first red flag came when he said he wanted to be the critical role for Brazil. Brazil mentioned the country we're all from, and that of course lacks something as big as critical role. I tried explaining to him that probably wasn't going to happen, because neither of us are 1. Actors, 2. Famous, 3. Likely to be as talented. He just shrugged, and said that was the idea. The real problem came when we got into discussing characters. I had this idea of playing an Echo Knight, focusing on hand crossbows with the crossbow expert feat. This was like a flashbang in the mind of the DM. First, he didn't understand that variant humans were a thing. Not like he didn't want to allow it, he just thought it wasn't official. When I finally convinced him, the problem became that he didn't understand that crossbow expert allows you to attack an additional time, using a bonus action, despite being clearly stated in the feat. Again, I spent a while showing Jeremy Crawford rulings, which he ignored because the game was his, and his interpretation of the rules. Then after a lot of talks, I managed to convince him to let me use the crossbow expert the way it was intended. Then came me talking about my idea on how to flavor the Echo Knight powers. I would like to think of it more like a portal that could be destroyed rather than a copy of my character. Again, mind flashbanged. He seemed to think that the flavor descriptions of the classes were part of the rules in Rules as Written. So for example, a Hexblade Warlock had to have a weapon from the Shadow Plane, etc. At this point, I'm already exhausted, and say that if he's going to dispute every step of the character building process, I would not be playing, and that he should learn the system first, and then try to be Critical Role. Oh, you know, just going to casually pop open D&D for the first time, and casually usurp the largest actual play podcast in the world, with me and a couple wacky pals I found online. Wishful thinking? Never heard of her. I have been part of a 4-year-long campaign, which I really enjoyed. There were 3 other players on the table, and the DM, who was really amazing. My character was a fighter who had become addicted to a drug, which had rage-like effects with a few other buffs. But he had started to lose his mind. Towards the end game, the entire arc of my character had been to conquer his addiction, and give up on the drug. And after the final session, I had said that he would go to be treated for the addiction, before marrying one of the NPCs. The DM wanted the new campaign to be in a completely different world, and one of the players, Helen, offered to DM a short game set 20 years in future. In her short game, she decided that instead of getting treated, my character had started taking the drug again. Had tried to— Again? Really? Can we just not have random bouts of sexual violence? It's just completely out of left field, come on. Had tried to— You know, the NPC he was supposed to marry. And her character had kicked his butt, and had now married the said NPC. Not only that, my character now lived in the slums, and was feral, while hers was one of the legendary heroes. And somehow, the rest of the party had been completely indifferent of how my character ended up. I was pissed, as I had been playing that character for 4 years. Not only me, others were surprised as well, and even said that she was writing a fan fiction. She got pissed off, and started saying how no one minded when the other DM told the story how he wanted. I was too annoyed, so I left the call, and apparently others also left the call after arguing further with her. She had tried to be controlling of others' characters ever since she had joined, but no one besides me had a problem with it before this. Oh my fucking god, she actually did it! She did the "I drew you as the soy Wojak" meme, but in your campaign. She's the awesome one. She stole your girl. She painted you as a loser, a monster, and a deviant. And for what? So she could look cooler than you in a game of pretend? This is a kind of derangement that has reached a whole new level. I have a small story I would like to share. Not a horror story, but very much a glory story. This happened a year ago, but it's a moment my whole group still remembers today. During our first session of Tomb of Annihilation, my players find their way towards the Colosseum in Port Nanzaru, where some dinosaur races are about to be held. And right outside the stables, there are several handlers attempting to pacify a rowdy Deinonychus, already saddled up and painted in green stripes. I specifically had this scene set up to draw them in, because I knew they would all love the chance to race, and this would be their hook. The gnome cleric takes out his flute, and rolls animal handling to attempt to calm the dinosaur, and he rolled incredibly high, so I gave it to him. The Deinonychus calms down, sways a bit to his music, and allows him to get close enough to pet its side. Easy boy, you're okay. I have the Deinonychus react very happily to the pets, while one of the handlers corrects him. Actually, Jungle Princess is a she. Yeah? Well, maybe he's a jungle prince. I wasn't expecting that, and it made me and the rest of the table laugh. And so I just go with it. The trans dinosaur is now Jungle Prince, and my player found the reason why he was so upset with his handlers by validating him with proper pronouns. It led to my player becoming even more bonded with this side activity dinosaur than I anticipated, and spawned a whole side quest of the party sneaking into a merchant prince's mansion to steal a dinosaur hide, to then give to another prince in exchange for this dinosaur's paperwork of ownership. My player ended up taking Jungle Prince all the way across Chult, through mountains and marshes, against zombies, hags, and wizards, and right into the lost city of Omu, only releasing him right when they were about to head into certain doom. It was a very sweet relationship that ended on a bittersweet goodbye. And we all get smiles when we talk about Jungle Prince now. Champion racer, brave fighter, and loyal companion. This is the most wholesome thing I've read all day. If anyone has a problem with our trans icon, known only as the Jungle Prince, then you are legally obligated to afflict them with the death curse. It was January, and I was looking for a D&D game to join after I'd quit my previous group due to clashing playstyles. DM tells me that my character had to believe in one of 3 gods. Weird, but okay. We start the game, and my character is in a church for some reason. No explanation as to why or how I got there. I'm just there. I rolled up a shy artificer. Immediately, One of the PCs in the game made a beeline for my character, which made me a bit uncomfortable. The first thing they do upon meeting my character is introduce me to their god. It's at this point that I must tell you about my character's backstory. I promise it'll be relevant later. My character was part of this scientist group that ended up accidentally creating a horrible mutant abomination that dedicated themselves to destroying his creators. After my character narrowly escaped, she found out the scientists were planning that exact thing to happen, just so they could pin it on her to avoid any conspiracy theories coming out about them. Because of how much this flocked up her mental health, she got the dark gift from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, known as the Symbiotic Being, which is essentially Venom. As soon as I met that other player's god, the DM tells me mid-session that their DMPC god killed all of the scientists in my backstory, as well as the abomination before my character could escape. Great. Now my whole backstory is irrelevant. Thanks, DM. Because of that, I quit the campaign, because I've listened to way too many RPG horror stories on YouTube to know where this is going. Either the DMPC god was gonna railroad my character and have my powers taken away for daring to try and do anything outside of the railroad, or they were likely going to do much, much worse to my character, if you know what I mean. I ain't up for no airship shenanigans today, no sir. I'd rather leave with my sanity intact. If you're expected to make a backstory, but another character's backstory or DMPC just invalidates it completely, then why the hell weren't you just asked to play a pre-made character instead? You dodged a bullet, you dodged a rocket, hell, you dodged the whole damn draft. The tavern was packed and the beer was flowing. The party had finally found a way to disguise themselves, so they were not immediately recognized from their wanted posters. Angelica had dyed her red hair black and was now at the bar, trying to get info to plan the group's next move. The rest of the party was drinking around a table, thankful to be finally getting a rest. The newest member of the group, an archer named Bowman, seemed to be a bit on edge, but everyone else was enjoying the night. They were enjoying the evening, until a man made an unwanted advance on Angelica. She tried to be polite. She told him no several times. He wasn't interested in being told no. Angelica slammed her tankard hard into the man's head, and he crumpled to the floor. A bar fight ensues. Fists, chairs, mugs. An acrobatic rogue climbs up to the rafters and starts throwing spoons at people. All non-lethal combat. Bowen goes last. He's seen that no one has drawn weapons, but apparently he is just not that bright. He pulls out his bow and shoots one of the combatants. Our DM asks several times if he is sure that's what he wants to do, and even points out this is a barroom brawl. He crits against a very low-level tavern patron, killing them instantly. Note: Rollmaster has a flaw system. One of the flaws is bloodlust, which would have explained his actions, but that wasn't his flaw. His rolled flaw was hemophilia, which will come up at the end. All fighting stops, and we try to help the patron to no avail. The town guard shows up, and Bowman thinks we're going to help him fight them. We don't. He is taken away by the town guard and charged with murder, and the party pretty much decides to wash our hands of him. But then, while in prison, he manages to get us a message. He is going to rat us out and reveal who we are, if we don't bust him out. We decided not to be blackmailed. We visit him in prison and toss him a blade we snuck in with us. As he picks it up, we yell, "He has a knife!" Now, instead of dropping the knife, he decides to attack us. The guards come rushing in and stab him several times in his now completely unarmored person, which the player didn't understand why he was unarmored in prison. His hemophilia adds to the damage, and he dies. We literally had to kill a fellow PC. In 30 years of role-playing, I've never had something like that happen before or since. This happened in my first session in my first campaign. I had played one-shots before, but had never been in a regular campaign before. So I was really excited to finally start playing one. Despite the warnings of said player that the GM was a bit difficult as a person, but a really good GM. After promising Session 0, Session 1 starts. We played as a group of mercenaries who had just been assigned to the same Special Ops team. After the first fight, my character, the de facto leader, gets into a conflict with Paladin over whether or not she has the authority to order him to use his healing powers. Because she is a military leader, not a priest, healing magic was both more rare in this setting compared to standard D&D, and purely divine. This led to an in-character conflict with good roleplay that I quite enjoyed. Until Paladin decided to slap my character, that is. This was not the problem. Paladin player, PP, we'll just call him Peter, even gave ample warning, both in character and out of character, that Paladin was getting pissed and might escalate to PvP. The problem was that GM now, not earlier when Peter had brought up PvP as a possibility, but only after it had happened, informed Peter that because Paladin had just attacked an ally who was a size category smaller than him, I was playing a halfling, he had broken his oath, and therefore lost access to his class features until he could complete a full night of prayer at the temple of his god. We are days away of journey from any temple. Peter argued that he was aware that paladins were not allowed to kill without reason, which is why he had called an unarmed, non-lethal attack. GM claimed that since he had not specified that he removed his gauntlet before attacking, the attack still counted as armed, and therefore he had broken his oath. I suggested retconning the whole thing, which both vehemently opposed, the GM reminding me that he specified no retcons for any reason in Session 0, which I now realize is a red flag. No retconning. Yeah, yikes. Look, sometimes you as a GM get caught up and describe an NPC incorrectly, or accidentally turn an evil character that was supposed to kill the party into a friendly one, or accidentally swap their name. Retconning happens way more often than you think. So removing all retconning it's a decision. Also, the players seemed completely fine with the PvP. So this shouldn't have been an issue? But unfortunately, this all continues into part 2. So let's dive in. They argued about it for over an hour. The rest of the group just sitting around awkwardly. Most of the fight was not about how justified or dangerous the attack was, or even if a single out-of-line action should really result in a broken oath, but whether or not an attack with a gauntlet counted as an armed attack or not. At one point, I started to cry because they were at each other's throats, and I felt like it was partially my fault for not having my character acquiesce earlier. To Peter's credit, at this point he did interrupt the fight long enough to assure me that it wasn't in fact my fault, and make sure I stopped crying, which I quickly forced myself to do out of embarrassment. GM did not react to the crying, which is why I don't think his reaction was a harsh measure to ensure Peter wasn't bullying the new arrival, but just hostility towards him. The session ended with Peter accepting the GM's decision with gritted teeth, and no one in the mood to continue playing. A few days later, Peter informed us that he would be leaving the group. We stuck it out with GM for over a year until one of the other players took over, and we started an actually fun campaign. Also, the reason the campaign got started in the first place was because GM wanted to play a game with Peter specifically. We were playing the Storm King's Thunder module and exploring a giant castle. The DM noticed that the book had specific DC 15 athletics requirements for attempting to open giant-sized doors. The DM applied this rule equally to everyone, including the giants who live in the castle. So the party was sneaking around and went into the giant's bedroom. The halfling rogue was spotted, but managed to squeeze back under the door. The giant went to leave his own bedroom to investigate, but failed the athletics check to open the door. Even without reading the book, all the players realized that logically, a giant should effortlessly open the door to his own bedroom and shouldn't have to roll at all. The DM just read the DC in the book and left it at that. Keep in mind, even with a +6 strength, the giants have a 40% chance to fail a DC 15. But wait, there's more. The DM had a house rule that you cannot reattempt a failed skill check for at least an hour, unless the circumstances of your roll have changed. So the giant was stuck in his own house with no way to open the door, except to bang on it and hope someone else in the castle heard him. This went to its illogical extreme when we got into a chase scene with the whole castle. Our Goliath barbarian took a potion of giant strength and successfully closed each door behind us. The DM rotated through the chasing giants' turns, having each one attempt to open the door, and if they failed, they went to the back of the conga line and ended their turn, since the door was still closed. So each door we closed meant fewer giants keeping pace with the overall chase. Either a giant used a full action to attempt to open the door, and then used their movement, or they failed, and, having used their action, couldn't prepare to dash for when the door opened. The DM didn't attempt to have them help each other, and was growing visibly frustrated each time a giant failed their roll. We all knew this was a bad call, but the DM was so stubborn on not changing his initial ruling in the bedroom that we just laughed as giants failed to open the doors again and again, until we escaped to our ship well ahead of the giants. Worst of all, when I looked at the DM's book at the end of the campaign, it specifically says in the sentence before the athletics DC that giants can easily open the doors because they are huge. I could only imagine the absolute horror on these giants' faces when they need to use the restroom. You either need an iron bladder to hold it for another potential hour or two, or scream in terror when you're locked inside the giant porta potty for a whole day because you keep failing your roll. Probably a tame one by this substandard's, but here we go. So I run a lot of D&D. I've even done it professionally as a paid DM, though not anymore. That's a separate post altogether, I think. But whilst I see and read a lot about DMs having issues with players who are introduced to the hobby through Stranger Things or Critical Role, this is the first time I've actually stumbled over the issue myself. And I'm kinda salty about it for 2 reasons. Number 1, the player in question ground the game to a halt in order to pitch and debate me running a class feature in a particular way. 2, as a veteran player and DM himself, he really ought to know better. In fairness, I was asking for trouble when I, at this player's request, funnily enough, allowed the Bloodhunter class. A class that Matt Mercer created. My only real defense is that 1, Curse of Strahd is an appropriate setting for an edgelord class like Bloodhunter, and 2, the issue is separate to the raw of Bloodhunter anyway. Player decides to play a goblin, a small race. He takes the Order of the Lycan subclass. All fair enough. He has gone for this were-shark transformation that's really cool. I should also explain at this point that, whilst the player will deny this, he is one of those players that absolutely loves to win, and will always try and put his character in a position to do so. That's not a problem by any means, but it also means that he really doesn't like it when his character isn't in that position. Anyway, after a player character died last session, the party starts this session looting the body, and Goblin eyes this heavy crossbow and calls dibs. I say that's fine, and gently remind them that small-sized creatures have disadvantage on using heavy weapons. He tries to argue,
No, I'm sure that's only tiny size.
cue the game being ground to a halt as we double-check. Nope, I'm right. Small size or smaller, sorry. Let's move on.
What about if I transform using hybrid transformation? I can be one size larger, right?
He asks. Nope, nothing in the rules as written about that. And I'm not about to allow it, because if a medium-sized creature played this class, they'd become large size when transformed, and that has major mechanical consequences, especially regarding reach, etc. Well, Matt Mercer says it could be run this way, and yet curiously didn't allow it when writing up the class. I'm salty, because this was a debate that stopped the game, and then dragged on because the player wouldn't initially accept no as an answer, until he felt he'd exhausted all of his excuses. This was also not a discussion that needed to happen there and then. I'm very happy to discuss the reasoning between sessions, but as a PSA to players, if you're trying to butter up your DM into allowing something to be run in a particular way, the worst thing you can say is, "Matt Mercer says you can," or "That's how Matt Mercer does it." Because one thing I was going to allow is for them to be able to breathe underwater in hybrid form. Makes sense for a wereshark, despite there not being anything in the rules as written to allow it. But I'm now genuinely worried that that'll be the proverbial inch that becomes the mile. Well, if you're going to allow that, then reveals long list of demands, including size growth again. So yeah, nothing group breaking or anything like that. I'm dreading the conversation with him, because it's not the first time I've had to address behavior, including a moment the session before last actually, where he tried to lie about what I'd said earlier in the session. I was grateful to have other players back me up on that one. They're great in low-stakes D&D games and campaigns where roleplay rules over mechanics, but more serious games seem to bring out something unpleasant in them. Now that I think about it, maybe that's the conversation I need to have with them. It is perfectly normal to have a discussion or talk with your DM about their rulings. A quick clarification, a speedy check of the rulebook, or a reminder of a previous ruling. That's perfect. If anything, more players need to do this. But a long-winded discussion that turns into a debate right in the middle of a session, there's a time and a place. I just don't like to think. Our problem player when asked why they keep making decisions that get their character killed. 7 deaths in a single in-game day. At a certain point, a line is crossed between a DM who runs a lethal game and a player who should win a Darwin Award. And it sounds like this player has crossed that line. Getting a friend into D&D. Asked if they needed help making their character. Now, do you need any help making a character mechanically? Smiley faces. I've never done it, so probs. Well, no, I have once. Would you like some help with that in a bit? I've done it a lot and like doing it. But the people who helped me then tried to lure me into a threesome, so I deleted the memory of how to do it. Is there a good, easy guide? I can give it a go. Oh god, that's unnerving. The perils of being a first year trying to join a D&D campaign. Is it? Why did they say it like that? Is every D&D game this person's ever joined just been an elaborate hoax from that poly couple you know that can never seem to find their unicorn? Yes, Danny and Jen, the whole world knows you're in an open relationship. The answer is still no. I joined my ex's campaign. What could go wrong? TLDR, my ex didn't want me to join their homebrew game because I would focus too much on the plot, and then looked the other way when a minor forced themselves into the plot. I also learned that speaking to my ex was a bad idea, and haven't spoken to them since. After a few years of one-off campaigns, I had finally joined up with a group of players to do a long-running story. The campaign was being DM'd by an ex-partner of mine, but the breakup was mutual, so I thought it wouldn't cause issues. I was so desperate for a game, I didn't look out for the red flags that started popping up in every part of the game, including before it started. My invitation to the game was the first warning I ignored. I only got it by coincidence. I was in a Discord call playing a game with some friends when my ex joined. They mentioned how they made a homebrew campaign and wanted to invite the other person that was in the voice chat. Our mutual friend didn't have interest, But I quickly joined in, saying how I'd join if they needed more people. They told me that they didn't really want me to join, because I get too focused on the story, and were worried that I, quote, would force other players to stick to the plot. I promised I wouldn't, and they reluctantly agreed to let me play, with an added request that I, quote, don't try and guess what happened next in the plot. A little hurt by the interaction, I moved on and went straight to designing my barbarian tiefling. This game took place in a homebrew world, where goblins and hobgoblins were the main intelligent species. Humans were practically extinct, and are killed on sight in this world. All other species were treated as second-class citizens, or worse. After the DM explained the world and how my character would fit into it, they started to tell me about the other players. I knew none of them, but was excited to meet new people. However, I was informed one person was a minor, 17. I was caught a little off guard, since the rest were around early 20s, including myself. A minor concern popped up knowing my DM had a very NSFW personality and sense of humor. That was something the two of us shared, but I assumed we both censor ourselves to keep the place appropriate. The game was being held online due to COVID. We used D&D Beyond and Tabletop Sim. Most people in the game were artists, including the DM, and a lot of custom maps were made. I was a 3D artist, and even working on how to import our custom hero-forged characters into Tabletop. This was before an update that made the whole process a whole lot simpler. We decided the best day was either going to be Wednesday or Friday around 7. A few days went by and Wednesday came around. I scrolled up through the chat to see if we ever said what time we were starting. After 5 minutes of scrolling, I couldn't find anything, so I sent a message asking for the time. The minor quickly responded to my message with a screenshot of the previous message with the time and said, "Please pay more attention to the information we're given in relation to the game." I apologized and came back once the game was set to start. The first day of the campaign was normal, mostly introducing the characters and start of the plot. We had a diverse cast of my tiefling, a dwarf, half-orc, and human. The human character was played by the minor. We were all prisoners tasked to do a job for a reduced sentence. We had to investigate a murder in a small town. Everything was going smoothly. I especially enjoyed the dwarf character. He was very energetic, upbeat, and the player kept that personality consistent. It was a nice contrast to the gritty overtones of the actual campaign. Early on in the campaign, right before a session, we were all talking about ourselves and our characters. Right before a session, I was sending images of my art from my phone, and I jokingly said, "I have to be very careful with what I send, because there's a lot of NSFW on my phone." The minor said, "Well, I wouldn't mind. I'm mature for my age. I'm practically an adult." I responded, "But you're actually not. You're 17. It's literally illegal if I did that." There was some awkward silence, but we quickly went back to getting ready for the game. The DM arrived and joined in the conversation. They said the human was the main character, and made it clear that wasn't a joke. I was a little worried about that, but didn't say anything since I was the outsider here. I didn't think it would affect the flow of the game. So we went back to our murder investigation. At one point, our party split. My character wanted some time to himself, while the rest of the party went to have dinner with the victim's family. As my character walked around, he ran into the number one suspect of the murder, a homeless old elf man. As soon as this was mentioned, the human wanted to leave the dinner to get to my character. My plan was to have my character just talk to the old man, but every time I tried to speak, the human player just kept interrupting me, trying to get out of the dinner that was on the other side of town. The DM was also ignoring everything I was saying, and focused on the dinner. The human broke character and left the handmade dinner for no reason, just to stop my character from talking to the elf. even though the rest of the party was a mile away, and I could easily have a conversation with the NPC elf. The DM instantly transported the human over, so they could progress the plot. That interaction ended with the NPC dead, and my character didn't get to talk to him. I was a bit annoyed, but the party went about and reported the case closed. After the session, the DM informed us that that was not the murderer, and it was in fact the mother of the victim. The DM kept bragging how they pulled one over us, and we were so dumb to fixate on the random homeless guy. I didn't think it was the homeless guy, and that's why I wanted my character to talk to the elf, but the DM didn't let me. I never said my thoughts out loud, since my DM made me agree not to try to guess what happened next in the plot. That session was very frustrating, and over the next week we were informed the dwarf player wouldn't be able to play anymore, due to life issues. We had only had 5 or so sessions up until that point, but I wasn't having fun. There were a lot of other smaller issues that were piling up as well. That friend that declined the invitation told me to quit the game because he could hear how negatively this game was affecting me. He even offered to set up a different campaign, since he knew that I was only playing that game because I had no other choice. I messaged my DM later that day how I wanted to leave the campaign. I thought the characters were reaching a point they could split off, but that wasn't the case. So my character had to die if I wanted to quit. I told my DM that was okay, and about an hour into the next session, my character's final battle took place. During the fight, the human revealed a special power where she could transform into a giant moth monster. I didn't get to find out much about it because my character died right after the transformation, and the bandits fled. The DM went into graphic detail about how my character was speared through the head, which they knew I wasn't okay with. They knew I was particularly queasy with death involving head injuries when we were dating. My character didn't get a burial, and my DM constantly brought up the hole in my character's head. I left the call at the mid-session break. I messaged the DM if they want to bring my guy back as a story beat for one of the other characters, and I wouldn't mind coming back for a hello. The campaign is still going to this day, with a bunch of new people, and I was kicked from the Discord group sometime in the last year. I only noticed I was gone when looking back for old messages for this story. Soon after I left, I was able to join a new Eberron campaign, and I'm loving it so much. We're coming up on our 2nd year anniversary. This DM is so much more open to character ideas and working everyone into the spotlight. I look forward to every session. I hope to share many glory stories of that campaign in the future. I haven't spoken to that original DM since I requested to leave, which is probably a good thing in the long run. That experience made me realize that our breakup wasn't as clean as I thought, and I should always leave a situation when I'm not getting anything of value out of it. There is always a D&D party that works well together. Sometimes it just takes time to find the one that fits you the best. If you're not being treated as an equal between other players, then you're either being picked on, or the DM has decided that one of you is the favorite and the rest of you can go flock yourselves. Which in this case, it seems like this DM did both. Also, how the flock did he explain the human just entering the scene like that? Did he borrow Littlefinger's jetpack from Game of Thrones? In any case, looking forward to your glory stories, and I wish you luck in Eberron. I play in a, currently paused, D&D 5e game set in a homebrew world, modeled after Magitech and a blurred line between the technological advancements between World War I and World War II. TLDR, dragons and wizards, but tanks and planes are on the rise. Guns and swords are used in equal part. The game is a very heavily tactics and espionage-focused story, with an emphasis on prep time and precise deployment of battle plans to avoid mission failure, all spiced up with heavy themes of personal and religious philosophies, dramas, and other deep world-building that all of us, players and DM, were allowed to add to. We used homebrew mechanics for weapons, critical hits, including crit tables, and a load of other well-balanced things handcrafted by our brilliant DM. To clarify on my dice luck, I am a walking anomaly. I'm nicknamed Captain Sub-Average Rolls, by my own admission, and on average across game sessions, where I can roll upwards of 20 times, I'll consistently roll below 10 on the die, every single time. No superstitious tricks able to fix the horrible luck, to the point where my DM had calculated the probability of my poor luck once as a fun little experiment, and was appalled by how statistically improbable it was. To that end, then, I compensate by making characters that either might min-max particular skills in hopes of countering my luck, or characters who avoid rolls altogether, like AoE magic effects, buffs, etc. My party took up the role of a special forces team, operating under the guidance of a theocratic government. Because I do not want to discredit any of the work my fellow players did for their characters, I'd like to list them. Characters were as follows: a drow warlock, agent of a shadowy cabal of otherworldly entities that have used him, his father, and his grandfather in succession as focuses of their power and will on the material plane. An Aasimar druid/warlock, a man who awoke with amnesia, only to discover he was far from human, slowly transforming into something like an Oblex, a shape-shifting intelligent ooze with a questionable line between sentience and simply stolen memories/thoughts, and struggling with the monster within. A tiefling fighter/warlock, the enforcer of one of the largest criminal organizations in the country, headed by a beholder in secret, planted into the team, knowingly, by our superior, whilst the two criminal and law elements keep an eye on the other. A warforged cleric/paladin rogue, formerly a spy working for one of our major antagonists, who, through a romance subplot with my character, ended up revealing her traitorous nature, revoking her old patron/father figure, and joining our side properly. Myself, an Aasimar barbarian paladin noble, the last being a homebrew class found on Reddit, modified by our DM for balance. A woman from an order of heavily religious saints, who had been soft excommunicated from her order for breaking too many rules, neglecting authority, and resorting to extreme violence. Saint Atalia Galoy, the Saint of Conquest. The game is, as mentioned above, incredibly tactically focused to the point where several sessions in a row can be nothing but tactical planning, intelligence gathering, and other such preparations. As I very much knew, my dice luck was bad. I set myself up to be the definitive tank for the party, and whilst the others planned and utilized resources, I managed session recaps to stay involved, help the flow of information, and occupy myself in situations where my character, for various reasons, would otherwise have to be tactically placed in a hole to wait for later. My general role was always the plan B. If our contingencies fail, if we get caught unawares, if a rogue element we couldn't possibly plan for throws a wrench into things, just throw the Saint of Conquest at it, was a meme. Not to say that I overshadowed the others, everyone had their strengths in combat, but I excelled specifically at hit thing, big number make brain go woo tactics. And with how our missions went, more often than not, I wasn't really so grandiose and important as the previous statement might have made me out to be. Most of our missions ended with minimal, controlled combat, and were successful because of my amazing party's big brain tactics. This particular mission was a dangerous one. Our country had just started a war with a long-running rival country on our southern border, and we were tasked with infiltrating a refugee camp belonging to the enemy, just beyond their battle lines. Because the camp also acted as a forward base for their intelligence operations, we needed to get in, secure sensitive intel we knew was there, and get out. The wrench in the plan had been that another neighboring country, think America with its general involvement in things, but with dragons, was a known element as we were dangerously closer to their border. Our intel suggested that they were supporting our enemy under the table, and we needed to prepare for the worst. We needed to prepare for a dragon. Plans went as well as they could, moving around the risk that anyone in the town could be a dragon in disguise, that True Sight might give away any attempts at magical disguises, and not to mention all the other precautions needed to get around regular mages. Plans had gone slow and meticulous before we had our goal in sight. A small bunker under a building that held what we needed. We moved each piece by piece to get there, so we could all escape using teleportation magic / scrolls. But as we made our final move, we were spotted. A rogue enemy rushed forward to interfere, jumped down into the close quarters of the bunker, and revealed himself to be a bronze dragon. Full panic mode. As initiative is being rolled and combat is starting, we're scrambling to figure out the best way to get out of the situation. In such close quarters, the breath weapon will hit all of us, and likely down most of us in a single go. Can confirm after having the Drow Warlock proofread this. At the time, he was rushing through every possible combination of his spells and skills to find a way to get us out of it. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to what the initiative order is. Who will act first? I get the highest initiative. I'm up before anyone else has a chance to move. Now, Saint Italia is the Saint of Conquest. She knows when to tactically retreat, but she'll be damned if she's going to cower and hide from the creature. With faith as her shield, she moves forward to engage the dragon and try to occupy it, so the others can try to get away. I do this, partially expecting my character to die. I roll to hit, and despite my usual constant bad luck, I crit. As mentioned above, with the heavy tactics and homebrew we use, I get to use the critical hit table my DM made, rolling a die based on the size of the table. The table picked based on the damage type of the weapon. Target is rendered unconscious for 1d10 rounds. Saint Italia lunges forward, and with great sword in hand, brings a dragon down in a single blow. I am blown away by the statistical chance of that happening. Somewhere around a 1 in 100 chance. We're all relieved, laughing at how almost anticlimactic our first dragon encounter was, but the DM and the others let me have that victory, later altering the rules that creatures with legendary resistances can spend one to ignore a critical effect. We escaped without anyone in the party suffering a single point of damage. And aside from a side adventure where Italia took a mortar shell to the face and survived, it's one of my favorite and go-to instances of how that woman earned her title, and easily my favorite glory story. Absolutely insane play. This right here is why more people should play a tank. No other kind of role is stupid enough to stand in the way of a dragon's breath, but sometimes it takes someone that bold to choose sacrifice over self-preservation. And in this case, just this once, everyone lived to tell the tale, and brag about their no-hit run to whomever would listen. I keep struggling to find the right words to these events, because as much as people wouldn't blame me for being upset with the others at the table, I have no ill will towards anyone in this story. To start things off, this took place around a year or two ago, so some details are fuzzy. My boyfriend had just started attending college, and I found myself with a lot more free time than him, as I couldn't find one that was the right fit. He knew I had dabbled in some Westmarch D&D servers on Discord, and that I had yet to particularly click with a group to run a campaign with. So he invited me to a server where his new friends would gather and play D&D. To say I was shy would be an understatement. Due to a life of constant bullying at home and school, I could barely even speak to other people. For my first session, I was almost entirely mute, as the character I had made was a halfling warlock / sorcerer, who was purposefully made to be a lawful stupid, overpowered joke build, with clearly rigged stats. I kept his main concept, that being his goal of being the ultimate tavern keep, who would attract everyone to a man-made city that would be like a moving castle and a beacon of knowledge, but cut out all the quirks that made him irritating, as I did not want to leave a bad first impression. When I asked about the clearly broken stats, the DM said to just use it as is. This was a bit of a mistake. Things started very well, as the tiefling and Goliath were immediately interested in this mysterious little man who hid his face in his spellbook, flavored as a cookbook. whenever they would look back at him. I could hardly croak out the words to say hello, as the DM kept pestering me to speak, but they were kind enough to inform me on their current mission. Not especially relevant, but it involved helping revive a dying dryad. Afterwards, we made camp and heard rustling from nearby. We investigated, and the DM describes several naked drow women with flaming swords running towards a temple. The tiefling immediately perks up, and she is very enticed by this sight and comes up with a plan to capture them using nets instead of directly harming them. Oh god. This immediately made a nervous laugh escape my body, but thankfully the Goliath stopped her from trying anything. Skipping ahead, my boyfriend joins as a dragonborn barbarian. This will be relevant later. He liked to eat people to fuel his rage, particularly elves, as their ears were perfect for on-the-go snacks. The main issue with him wasn't that he would threaten to eat people. For the most part, it was quite funny. What he would do wrong was forget to use his ancestral spirits to cover us in combat. Good God, the combat. The DM was very brutal with combat. We were only level 3, facing off of Rock and Yachtel, big, stinky peanut butter demon, simultaneously. After that combat, we were led to my character's village, where the Dragonborn would immediately say that since we're at my place of origin together, that meant we had to be married, and there was no backing out of this proposal. This would make every NPC we ever encountered after this moment hear of the engagement, and no matter how hostile the word congratulations would be used, I hope to make an effective running joke like it in my games. The DM would drag us into private calls, and for me, it was the patron goddess of the halflings. She told me the village was in peril by a vicious man-eating beast, and that she personally was sending a test of my faith in her as an additional challenge for me to solo. We found a giant infernal spider that was extremely aggressive towards my character in particular. I managed to blast it to pieces, thinking this was my test of faith for the people, as suddenly, another monster ambushed us. A demonic orc, wielding a fanged greatsword and a hunger for flesh. I must admit, I metagamed the encounters the DM gave us, as I was only aware of lower CR monsters, and the DM regularly used monsters well over twice our level in combat. This creature was only CR 5, and we were level 4 if I recall, so it was challenging at first. Then it quickly turned into all of us beating down the thing into pulp, JoJo style. While we celebrated our demon-slaying escapades, we received news of an invasion of Drow and Dwergar that found the hidden village. As reinforcements, we received a group of halfling mercenaries that the DM openly stated were named after a neo-Nazi group, and they had very interesting things to say about the dark-skinned invaders of their land. A few uncomfortable laughs later, and some light torture on the Drow lieutenant. Nothing super bad, just froze him in a block of ice until he talked, and we got a lead on the name and possible location of the Drow matriarch. I'm not sure when this was, but at a certain point, a meteor crashed in front of us, and out of it, there were star spawn crawling out, thanks to eldritch cultists conducting a ritual to awaken and hatch the seedling. One of the star spawn was the infamous Mangler, which, as a recharge ability, can deal about as much damage as 2 attacks of a Balor's Whip. And that's without the additional 2d6 every hit, if it has advantage. The other star spawn spent their turns providing said advantage until me and my boyfriend are the only ones left alive. The DM then decides that a bright light has surrounded me, and my blood awakens to cast Revivify on everyone as it boils me alive. This doesn't kill me, but I wake up without my sorcerer powers, and unable to tap into them once more. This leads me to having to take wizard levels to compensate for the lack of utility. And while I admit I had a temper tantrum about how I, as the healer, couldn't save anyone, the DM got snarky and stated they would have survived if my boyfriend announced his ancestral spirits activated when he raged. Apparently, whenever he didn't make a big deal about it, The effect never occurred, and everyone would take full damage even when near the Dragonborn. The Goliath would immediately then start to slam his great axe into the meteor, and then use its void edge on himself to not only discover he now wields the power of depression in void form, but now a BBEG has taken host in his body, after surviving the near-death experience via alien contact. The DM made it a point to state that there are far more powerful characters than us in the world. Nowhere is that more obvious than the impossible boss fights. The one most relevant to the previous was when we were tasked with literally having to beat Goku in a fight, which proved wholly impossible because every spell or attack that was landed on him made his hit points grow as he leveled up from every attack made against him, as he manages to replicate all our abilities and then soul nuke us to oblivion, which is hand-waved with him being able to instantly transmit us to a cleric for free healing. The part that makes me the most angry was when he gave my character a pat on the head and just reawakened my burnt-out powers. So here I am, with a mixture of 3 classes and no way of undoing the wizard ones, as apparently they were set in stone when I remade the character. The tiefling, during our downtime, would randomly decide to leave town through stealth, find a random underground brothel in a foreign city, and then do some weird-ass RP with the DM's villainous pimp character who enslaved her, and made her give oral while me, the Dragonborn, and the Goliath were all literally begging in voice chat for them to take it someplace else. As expected, the rescue mission goes poorly. Long story short, we end up setting his house on fire, and he flies in, throwing fireballs at us, and instantly dropping the Dragonborn to 0 hit points by casting Mental Prison on him. Turns out the DM randomly decided to make brothels more powerful than the nation's military, and the pimps were effectively demigods compared to us. The pimp states that we are to participate as his slavers, and deliver at least 4 model-quality females to replace the tiefling, or else all our souls will be ripped from our bodies and turned into his trophies. What the hell am I reading? Why is the BBEG just demigod Andrew Tate? Why is Goku literally in this setting? Why was your backup a bunch of neo-Nazi halflings? Fucking Frodo from Stormfront. I'm sorry, I wanted to save all of my talking about this for the conclusion of this story, but this is just such a strange story, I just have to say something. Okay, let's just get back. Before our due date even arrived, a cracked-out Quickling servant of his attempted to assassinate us with the help of Will-O-Wisp to harvest our souls for the pimp. The Quickling is one of the reasons I couldn't stay at the table. It moved so fast, took almost no damage from our attacks, and would attack several times for 3d8 damage every time he hit. After an hour of fighting this thing, we were almost out of resources, and I did the math. Turns out we dealt easily over 100 damage, and the Quickling wasn't even bloodied, that being half hit points. Until I threw a fit about the fight being bullshit, and leaving the voice call, after the DM heard the damage total from all of us and only managed to say, "Oh, after around 150 damage, it suddenly became bloodied, and died after like 225 damage. Turns out this thing had player levels. And while the DM wouldn't state how many, me and my boyfriend did the math, and it was determined the Quickling had to have been at least meant to be faced by a level 15 party, with how much it resisted our attacks and nearly downed us all every turn. Oh, also the tiefling just fucking dips from the game, and next we see her is like 2 months later, when we have a new Dragonborn player, this one being a bard that manages to be less horny than her. And the game goes on, until out of nowhere, she stops us all at the end of one of our best sessions, one being entirely dedicated to her homeland and taking her pirate ship back from corrupt elven officials, with one captain in particular being known as the blade singer that never knew when to die, because of his crazy 25 AC to then yell at all of us for ruining her world, and that we didn't take the game seriously enough for her to have any fun, and that she had expected us to stop making fun of everything because we were ruining her immersion in the world that she made with the DM. The DM apologizes for her outburst as she leaves the voice call, and she pretends that it never happened. Last thing I remember her doing in the game was making us all deeply uncomfortable with another ERP moment. This time, even the DM wasn't enjoying it, because it was with her and her in-game tabaxi girlfriend, whom she went into vivid detail about railing over and over with her fuda cock while making moaning noises to give us the full mental image. The bard wasn't much better, but at least he kept anything he wanted to do in private with the Goliath. Can't think of any complaints about him other than his inability to understand that Thunderwave hits everyone around him, including the rest of the party. Even then, it's only slightly annoying and more goofy because we got to make fun of him whenever he'd forget. Now it's time for some issues we had out of game. The Goliath would sometimes ramble on about nonsense no one cared about, and lately I've grown a spine to inform him whenever he's derailing the game with a rant, as he could go on for hours about the most random subject and still figure out new ways to arrange the vocabulary so he could talk longer. He's still a good friend of mine, but it's just a little thing that gets on my nerves since I was a quiet person, and whenever I'd try to speak, his rants would talk over me. One other problem he had was failing saves on purpose to cause drama, an act which he collaborated on with the DM, so he and his cursed weapon could attack us for entire combat encounters with no consequences. Thankfully, he's since acknowledged that as being a mood killer, and hasn't caused any more incidents like that. My boyfriend was definitely chaotic stupid. He struggled to grasp the concept that D&D isn't a video game, and he couldn't murder hobo his way through life. Later it was revealed that as months went on, even he was tired of being chaotic stupid, and he was only doing it to derail the DM's plans and piss him off for always railroading us with every NPC being stronger than the entire party. The tiefling definitely had issues. She was always horny and often derailed the game to talk about her massive tits and peeps. And when I first talked with her, she told me she was into guillotines. I asked my boyfriend how the hell he became friends with her, and his response was that she seemed normal when initially bringing us into the server, but quickly devolved into actual insanity, to the point she'd stalk him and always tried to coerce him into bed with her. Thankfully, from what I've heard, she sought help and told everyone that the DM groomed her into being a nymphomaniac. She's in a happy relationship now, and I hope she never becomes the same person I had to endure D&D with. The DM is somehow even more unhinged than the tiefling in my opinion, as the moment my boyfriend joined the game, he would talk over me whenever I spoke about an issue I had with the game, and told me to shut up or I'll coom on your face, which angered my boyfriend for obvious reasons. He would ramble on about politics and how communism is the only sustainable economic system, while in the same breath argue with the entire group that traps aren't gay because he likes them and is straight. I'd assume these moments were jokes if he didn't get legitimately angry. One horrific rant lives rent-free in my head. That it's completely okay to flock your stepsister because you aren't blood related, and that actual incest is okay as long as there's no baby, before randomly interrupting himself to say his cousin is hot, but he wouldn't actually sleep with her in real life. Fucking least insane tanky. I believe my breaking point, speaking of which mine has already passed, was when I couldn't take it anymore, and I yelled at him that I quit the table. His response to this was to have a conversation with me, the Goliath acting as a neutral party in the discussion. I actually felt as if he understood my problems with the game, and how him saying perverted stuff to me whenever my boyfriend was present made me very uncomfortable. I shit you not. The moment the Goliath thought the talk was over and left, the DM launches into a rant about how it's better for me to quit my job and live on welfare than to work. I was so angry I deleted my Discord, so I wouldn't have to chat with him again. From what the Goliath has told me, he sought help as well, and has since stopped with the incel rants and even found himself a girlfriend. I honestly hope the best for both of them, and pray his girlfriend never has to deal with his old mannerisms, especially considering what happened with the tiefling. I also remembered that whenever I tried to run a game, he would rarely join, and when he did, he would get high and pass out in voice chat. It took like a year before I became confident enough to run a game from how much that messed me up. And for the finale, me. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious already, I was quite the problem player myself. Even heavily omitted, it's plain as day that when I would get talked over and watch brutal combat down everyone as I run out of spell slots, I would get furious. I'd throw a massive fit and then yell at my boyfriend when he would try to comfort me and bring me back to the table, because to him, it was only a game. And I shouldn't take it so personally, that the encounters were bullshit, because what really mattered was he and I had a hobby together that we could share. And while the combat was tough, there's always the chance of success. I regret the harsh words I said in response, because while I could have stated that it matters to me, and that the game might not be a good fit, I instead used personal insults towards him for being optimistic about the game. I consider myself lucky that I still have him with me, and I hope that by telling this story, others learn to stop themselves before ending up like one of the many problem players featured here. TLDR, the entire table, including myself, were all problem players, and our table broke because of it. I'm astonished that this story concluded with some degree of hope for everyone involved, especially when considering how horrendous these games seem to be. But I did receive a second submission by this OP, so let's see if this is still true. Update to the horror story I sent you. My boyfriend and I were talking, and I completely forgot the reason that I wanted to debate the DM, and needed a mediator to make sure it doesn't devolve into a screaming match, was because when I ran low on inspiration, I wanted to run a new campaign, as the party drastically changed the plot, and I needed time to prepare new content for them to explore. The second campaign was meant to be a massive city where state-sized districts would follow a particular form of faith and philosophy representing their alignment. The DM had the audacity to say that they wanted to not play as any alignment, and want a character that doesn't believe in anything, which was literally the definition of the neutral evil nihilist faction I made. His response? No, they believe in nothing, and that's a belief. I don't even believe in that. I struggle to see the difference, but go off, I guess. The group devolved into an argument about why he always tries to throw a wrench into my games, and he says he wants his goal to be to slay the gods rather than believe in them. This was the definition of the chaotic evil consumer faction, proving even more that he just didn't read any of my lore whatsoever. His excuse was that the idea of eating godly entities was a belief of gaining power, but he didn't want to slay gods, he wanted to slay the god. I was hyped because I thought I could turn this into a group fights a creator god that made the damned world they live in scenario. He didn't want that. He said he'd elaborate more and left the voice chat. So what did he want? Well, about a week later, I get a personal message on Discord and my blood froze, as with no context, I get, well, I want to kill you, like the DM, in real life. This is what sparked me to just give up. I didn't ever run the game, and I deleted my Discord, so I didn't get any "it's what my character would do" death threats, because apparently he's so bored when he isn't the DM that he joined my games just to destroy them. It took a long time, but I finally started playing recently. Not even D&D. Pathfinder, Fabula Ultima, Savage Worlds, and in a weird way, if this disaster of a story never happened, I'd be one of those 5e loyalists who never expands their definition of a fun role-playing game. I wish him luck, and I hear his campaign is going well. Hopefully, no one gets murdered in or out of game. Look, while I'm glad that you personally could be able to forgive this, and move past your own faults as well, I personally could never imagine myself hoping anything nice for a guy like that after he literally sent me a death threat over Discord. You're clearly built different. I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's different. And if you're able to harbor no ill will after all this, then I guess I'm able to move on to the... Oh god, I'm not even halfway through this. You gotta be kidding me. Why the hell did I agree to read 100 stories? That damn crab knew, didn't he? Is that why he called to congratulate me? This was all a setup. There has to be a way. Some way I can get help.
What will Jacob Crowe do now? Will he find the help he so desperately needs to finish this several-hour-long video? Has Crit Crab been conspiring against him in secret? Will Skippity Toilet die before I get a chance to put it in a thumbnail for clickbait purposes? Find out in the second chapter of the Crow's Perch 100 special.